Key takeaway is an historic, unprecedented plunge, Wilfred, in Americans' views on the economy, but yet some continued optimism about the future. We put this plunge in context of other major events, and what you'll see is it's a faster and bigger decline than we saw, for example, in 9/11, and then we saw after the 2008 financial crash. As just one example, we declined by 19 points in Americans' views on whether the economy is excellent or good, but that took 6 months after the 2008 crash. 25-point decline in 24 days with the COVID-19 crisis. 1 in 4 Americans report that they've either lost their job or seen their wages cut because of the coronavirus. Another 10% say they expect that to happen then. So that's 1 in 3 Americans expect their basic lifeline to be hurt by the COVID-19 crisis on the economic side. However, 51% are saying they think the economy will improve in the next year. That's up 17 points. That's also a record. So they've taken their confidence now and put it in down the road. As for handling of the virus, 75% approve of what the CDC is doing. 57% say they approve of what the Fed is doing. The president, Congress, and Republicans and Democrats in Congress all seem to fare about the 50% level. Now, who should get relief from the government? Interesting results here. Good agreement that hospitals, small business, local restaurants ought to get government relief. Less so when you get into airlines, oil and gas, Boeing, cruise companies, and casinos. So, people are generally behind the idea of the $2 trillion spending. They're also behind helping companies, but they make some distinctions about which companies ought to get relief from the federal government. Wilfred?
Yes, Steve. I mean, I guess it's a simple, relatively simple survey. It's hard to go into the next question on bailouts, which is what people think about the structures of bailouts. And there's a big difference, of course, between keeping people in their job and allowing shareholders to benefit from the upside in terms of their equity holdings that they have currently.
You know, we did get into that back in the last crisis, and we're going to resuscitate some of those questions in the next round of polling, Wilfred. But you're right. When it gets down to individual type stuff of whether or not companies, or especially big companies, ought to give something up, the public tends to believe that they shouldn't get a handout from the federal government. In fact, Wilfred, the answer to your question is really in that chart. That chart says those companies that have a hard time really taking care of themselves ought to be helped. And the bigger companies, the bigger industries, airlines, oil and gas, you don't see it there, but large banks also in that red area there. Boeing, those are the ones that should take care of themselves, whereas the smaller ones ought to be helped by the government.
And Steve, the other thing I'd be interested to see is what other countries' approval ratings for their leaders look like, because, of course, none of us expect leaders to have had a magic wand to totally solve this crisis. So it's hard to gauge what really 50% for President Trump's approval means without kind of comparing it to some other leaders in similar situations.
His overall approval rating actually did go up, and in fact, it's above water, so to speak. In other words, his approval is higher than his disapproval for the first time in the 3 years we've been tracking Trump during his presidency. Our pollsters describe this as a kind of rallying around the flag, and something similar happened to President Bush after 9/11. He was not able to retain it, and the question is, from a political point of view, as we head into November, can the president retain that rally around the flag approval that's helped him out as a result of this crisis?